Hi, this is Diego from SidecarTridge, and welcome to the second part of our deep dive into the wild world of TOS for Atari ST. If you have ever wondered how a slightly rushed, sometimes quirky, but endlessly fascinating operating system managed to hold an entire generation of computers together, you are in the right place. In this video, we will trace the official TOS releases from Atari for the STE and Mega STE series, wander through the world of custom and community-driven versions, and finish up with the crown jewel of open source replacements, EmuTOS. And, just for fun, we'll put them all through their paces on real Atari hardware using the SidecarTridge TOS Emulator. Let's get started. Fasten your seatbelts, time travelers. We have arrived in 1989. Atari has rolled out the new 16-bit Atari STE, essentially an Atari ST with a few new tricks, like a palette of 4096 colors, stereo sound, and a blitter chip built in. Of course, a new hardware sheriff in town needs a new operating system. And here comes the TOS 1.06, the STE's very own OS version. Well, what's new? Well, honestly, not much on the surface. It was almost identical to TOS 1.04, the Rainbow TOS, except now it spoke the STE's language. But under the hood, two major changes stand out. First, the STE moved to a larger 256 kilobytes of ROM, up from the previous 192 kilobytes in earlier STs, giving the OS and built-in applications more breathing room, and finally making the infamous line F hack unnecessary. Second, the location of the ROM in memory changed. On the STE, TOS now lives at its E0000 instead of FC000, aligning with the new hardware design and freeing up address space for other uses. At the end of the video, I will explain how this change made the new ROMs incompatible with the older Atari ST and Mega ST computers, and how using the TOS emulator with a 256 KB decoder can overcome this limitation. TOS 1.06 also added support for the ST's shiny new features, so it could actually use that fancy hardware. And the result, a slightly more efficient OS, no more tripping over line F exception every few microseconds, and potentially a minor speed boost in system calls. It's like Atari took TOS 104, gave it a quick tune-up, and said, here you go, ST, try not to crash anymore. Yet, true to form, Atari managed to slip in a classic bug. TOS 1.06 had one job. Remember the screen resolution, and it failed spectacularly. This version wouldn't correctly save the video mode, meaning your STE always boot in low resolution and stubbornly refused to start in medium res. Every reboot, you will have to manually toggle the resolution. Annoying? You bet. It's as if TOS 106 woke up with amnesia each morning. As you can see in the video, there is no way to save medium resolution at all in TOS.106. Amazing. This is what I call the memento bug. Atari quickly issued TOS 1.62 as a bug fix in 1990, mainly to fix the resolution snafu. Aside from patching the memory lapse, TOS 1.62 didn't add much else. It's basically 1.06 with a bit more polish and slightly fewer opportunities to pull out your hair out. In summary, the ST era of TOS was an incremental step. Support for the new hardware, moved to a bigger 256 kilobytes of ROM at a new memory address, a squash a bug or two, nothing revolutionary yet, but bigger changes were on the horizon. Now, let's fast forward to 1991. Atari, still in the computer race, well, barely, releases the Mega STE, a souped up ST for business users, with a higher clock option, internal hard disk, and a fancy case. To make it feel more mega, Atari bumped the OS version number and introduced the TOS 2 series. Initially, TOS 2.05 shipped with the Mega STE, a 256 kilobyte ROM like the ST TOS, but tailored for the new machine. TOS 2.05 was a bit of a rarity, quickly overshadowed by the TOS 2.06, which arrived around 1992 as the ultimate official TOS for the ST family. This was the grand finale for Atari's 68K machines, excluding the TT and Falcon, which had their own OS versions that we will explore in future videos. And let me tell you something, this version came with a bag of goodies, at least by 1982 standards. While I load the new TOS 2.06 in the video, I would like to explain what makes it special. For starters, it introduced a new Jam desktop with many improvements. Basically, this interface got a facelift and some quality of life upgrades. And also there are some things that were improved, like the speed. You can also show more icons that are maybe better looking, some tweaks that feel more modern and smooth, and most importantly, it brought extended hard disk support and bug fixes. Regarding the speed of the user interface, basically we have the same results at versions 1.62, so what makes the difference is the blitter. On the flip side, all these changes came at a cost to backward compatibility. Applications or games, mostly, that were tightly bound to the old TOS internal calls sometimes broke when running on 2.06. Atari basically threw out some old behavior for the sake of progress. Obviously, most big software had updates or patches to work on TOS 2, but some titles, especially games, it's not strange to get bumped when you run in this new version. But hey, we have the TOS emulator to change our TOS version in a breeze. Nonetheless, TOS 2.06 is remembered fondly as the pinnacle of the official ST operating systems. It was fast, no more line F exception overhead, fairly stable, and feature-rich. It's the only Atari-made TOS that can, with some tweaks, run on any 68,000 base ST, from the 520 ST with the new ROM decoders all the way to the Mega ST. In fact, if you are on the ST users in the 90s, upgrading your machine ROMs to TOS 2.06 was considered the ultimate OS upgrade. Atari had effectively moved on to their TT and Falcon by this time, leaving 2.06 as the last hooray for the classic ST line. Little did they know that that wasn't the end of the TOS story, not by a long shot. While TOS 2.06 was the last official Atari ST desktop release in 1991, there is a fascinating postscript, TOS 2.08, a version developed for Atari ST laptops like Stacy. TOS 2.08 is rare, largely undocumented build on the Atari ST operating system, and created specifically for Atari Stacy portable computer. It seems that was found a handful of Stacy computers for late or developer machines running TOS 2.08. A patched Atari ST TOS is a version of the original Atari ST operating system that has been modified after its official release, usually by independent developers or hobbyists. These modifications or patches are applied to fix bugs, add features, improve compatibility, or enhance performance beyond the Atari originally provided. So let's have a look at the most popular ones. EmuTOS 2.06 isn't a brand new operating system, but rather a clever patch of a standard TOS 2.06 that unlocks full window content dragging. Introduced around 1995, this enhancement brought a noticeable smoother desktop experience, especially on faster STE and Mega STE or accelerator-equipped ST machines. What sets EmuTOS 2.06 apart? Essentially, it's the original Atari TOS 2.06 with one standard tweak. You can drag windows around the desktop and see the entire contents move in real time, not just the window outlines. Atari had disabled this feature in official releases due to performance concerns, but SuperTOS enabled it for users with upgraded hardware. This patch TOS quickly gained a following. Many users appreciated the enhanced and more polished user experience, while others felt the benefits didn't just justify the changes. On a personal note, I gave this version a try, but ultimately had to stop using it as it didn't play nicely with some popular software, most notably GFA Basic. Peter Pipera Patnik is an indie Atari developer re-owned for deep reverse engineering and clever TOS enhancement. He first got noticed with his patch TOS 104 without line F, as we saw in the previous chapter. Seeing the limitations of the official TOS 2.06, Pipera created an official hybrid build called TOS 2.16 that blends the GEMDOS core from TOS 1 version with the TOS AAS VDI of TOS 2.06. His process was not a mere patch. He fully optimized and rewrote substantial portions in assembly and also compressed the code. As you can see, we are booting this version. I don't own a version of this because you have to pay him for it. It's a friend of mine had a version of patch TOS, and as you can see, what we're seeing is what he recorded. One of the major improvements are new built-in functions to manage the hard disk. There's also integrated, as you can see, a FAT16 partitioner, but sadly, it does not work very well with the SidecarTridge multi-device. The multi-device driver works very well with other AHCI drivers, so I don't know why it does not allow another drivers to work. Well, or maybe this is an old version or something, but yes, I have a lot of people reporting this error, and well, I cannot do anything about that. That's something that Pipera should manage. This is a German version of the 2.16 patched TOS. As I said, I don't own a version of this patch because you have to pay for it. And yeah, it's really cool to see how it behaves and how you can really change the look and feel of the user interface through customizing the TOS. So this is something that is really cool. Now let's give a try to the Gebench and let's compare the results with the previous results on TOS 2.06 and 1.62. The Gebench is the tool that we always use to test the performance. We always compare with the baseline on Gebench on TOS 1.04 for ST. So we always use that baseline, and as you can see, we accelerate. There are places in this video that I'll accelerate not to make you wait for booting or changing the TOS and whatever. Okay, so yes, there are a slight increase in performance compared to version 2.06. As a summary, I think that this patched version is like Pepera's director cut of Atari TOS. I think it's pure technical wizardry. But I think that these patched versions of TOS, I'm not sure it's worth to use them on a daily basis. They are very interesting, especially Pipera, but I don't know. There are alternatives to Atari TOS that Atari did not develop. These operating systems are TOS compatible or TOS-like, meaning they run Atari ST software and provide a similar user experience, but were created independently by other developers or companies. Let's focus on these two for the 256 kilobyte ROM machines. While Atari was busy releasing official TOS updates in the late 80s and early 90s, a couple of smart Germans were cooking up something magical on the side. Remember Chaos TOS 124 from Part 1, the unofficial turbocharged TOS by Andreas Kromke and Dirk Steinkopf? Well, one of its authors, Kromke, took his optimization obsession to the next level and in 1992 introduced Magic, a complete new third-party operating system for the Atari ST. Yes, you heard that right. A new operating system. Magic is a multitasking capable TOS compatible OS that basically turns your ST into a modest multitasking machine. It was like giving the ST the ability to juggle multiple programs at once, something vanilla TOS could never do. Magic was designed for speed and compatibility. The kernel was handwritten in assembly for efficiency, and it managed to implement preemptive multitasking on the 68,000 CPU. This means the OS could switch between tasks on its own repeatedly to give the illusion that programs run simultaneously, a trick that up to then was mostly confined to expensive Unix workstations or the Amiga. Under Magic, you could actually run multiple Jam applications at once, as long as you have enough RAM and they were well behaved. Suddenly, the ST felt a lot more like a modern computer of the 90s. It was largely backward compatible with TOS programs, so most apps ran fine, and many ran faster thanks to Magic's highly optimized routines. In fact, Magic saw its significant performance advantage over both original TOS and the patched ones. So a couple of indie devs outdid Atari's engineers in making the ST operating system snappier and more capable. Magic went through numerous versions, with major updates through the 90s. The final version was the one that we are seeing, version 6.2, released in the late 90s, and it was extremely polished. This was truly the high end of the ST operating systems. The amazing part is that Magic C eventually was open source in the 2000s. The version that we are watching here is the 256 kilobyte ROM image in the SidecarTridge TOS Emulator. So you can boot it like a standard TOS with the tool. Why do this? First, because you save RAM, which is very important for Magic, and because it's cool. And here we have the results of the Geekbench, and the results are amazing. Obviously, Cronky is a genius optimizing the system calls of the Atari TOS system. Of course, even Magic isn't 100% perfect. Some very old or poorly behaved software still expect the single task environment of the TOS and might freak out under Magic's multitasking, especially games, demos, the one that's bang the hardware directly. The Magic manual practically begs you not to run those without disabling the multitasking. But for productivity and general use, Magic was, and is, a revelation for the ST. It kept the platform feeling alive and even modern well into the 90s. It's a testament to what could have been if Atari had continued investing on the ST's OS development. But hey, they didn't, but the community stepped up. As the 90s gave way to the 2000s, one might think that the story ends. The ST was a distant memory in the era of Pentiums and PowerPCs, but the Atari community never says die. Enter EmuTOS, an open source reimplementation of the Atari ST operating system that first emerged around 2001. If Magic C was like a hot rod upgrade to TOS, EmuTOS was more of a clean room reimagining of TOS. The goal of EmuTOS is simple: provide a free, legal, and modern replacement for TOS on all Atari machines and beyond. It's not built from Atari source to avoid any copyright voodoo. Instead, the developers wrote it from scratch to behave like TOS. Over the years, EmuTOS has evolved into a very capable OS that can run on anything from an original 520 ST to a Firebee, a modern Core Fire-based clone, even on Amiga hardware for kicks. We have already talked about EmuTOS for 192 kilobyte ROM computers, but what's new in 256 kilobyte ROMs? For users of upgraded or later Atari machines, EmuTOS has specific builds that take advantage of hardware. On the ST Mega ST, the standard EmuTOS ROM is the 256 key and includes support for things like alternate RAM without needing separate drivers. It has a built-in command line interface, like it's a simple text console you can invoke before gem loads, and it's very useful because you can You can save and you can solve problems, for example, in the auto folder. If there's something in the auto folder that crashes your systems, you can break into the prompt, delete, rename, change things. And that's something that you cannot do in stock TOS. So let's say it's like having something more close to what real developers or real IT professionals expect from a professional system. Despite all these enhancements, EmuTOS strives to maintain compatibility with Atari software. In practice, most ST and ST programs run fine, and many users, especially in the retro scene and demo scene, use EmuTOS as the daily driver of OS on hardware and emulators. It also has some performance benefits, especially, for example, in the memory allocation implementation, which is more efficient. And let's say that it can outperform Atari TOS in some EO operations from my perspective. The user interface in the EmuTOS is like a blend of the old and the new. So there are the gem desktop basics, is still there with the classic green background, and it has small tweaks like the keyboard shortcuts that I love. I love it. I really love it. So let's say that the only thing that I really miss of EmuTOS is multitasking. But well, you have Mint for that, so it's not really a big deal. Regarding the performance is not. I think it's the less performant of all the TOS that we have seen. And why? Well, my guess is less performant because it has to maintain compatibility through different systems. So let's say that I think they sacrifice raw performance for compatibility. But well, there is a very active community. It's actively maintained, and there was a new release a few weeks ago. So maybe you can go and ask them why this difference in the performance. Now a quick reality check. If you were rocking an original ST or Mega ST, the ones with 198 KB ROM, you couldn't just plop TOS 206 and expect it to work. Why? Because those older machines literally lack the address decoding hardware to handle that size of ROM, and also the proper memory locations. 192 kilobyte ROMs start at address FC0000, while 256 kilobyte ROMs start at E00000. So a 256 kilobyte ROM was too big for the old ST and Mega ST without a little help. Since Atari never released a 192 kilobyte version of 2.06, if you want it on your ST, you had to hack it. And some enterprising folks in the 90s designed hardware mods to add the necessary address line logic, often involving PG backboards or glue logic and multiple EPROMs to get that 256 kilobyte ROMs working on the ST. Flash forward to today, and thankfully, we have gentle solutions. Modern devices like the SidecarTridge TOS 256 kilobyte decoder make running these TOS versions much easier. This nifty add-on board provides the extra address decoding and a synthetic chip-enabled signal so that the stock ST and Mega ST can finally address a 250 kilobyte ROM in the E00000 range. In combination with the SidecarTridge ROM emulator, you can fire up an Atari ST and have it believe it is an ST or a Mega ST when it comes to the OS. TOS 2.06 on the 520 ST, no problem. The decoder essentially tricks the ST bus into accepting the larger ROM, all without permanent mounts. It's an elegant solution, and we wish we had that 30 years ago, but well, here we have it now. So if you want to hop between the TOS 1.04 and 2.06 on the same machine, or even try out obscure versions, it's as easy as selecting an image, and you don't need to do chip sweeping acrobatics to do it. Well, there is one catch here. Not all 256 kilobyte TOS versions actually work on older STs, even with the decoder. The TOS 1.06 and 1.62, the early ST ROMs, and the TOS 2.05 don't play nice with the plain ST hardware. They assume certain STE or Mega ST features, and it will just crash or hang if you run on the ST. But EmuTOS and TOS 2.06, we run very happy on ST with the decoder, of course. Because both were coded to remain compatible with older models. So let's say that unified as Atari intended. In this demo, we started with TOS 1.0, the first version that was available in ROM. We swap it to Rainbow TOS 1.04, and now we have changed it to TOS 2.06. And as you can see, we are able to change it in a breeze, and it's working without any issue. Now I'm going to run again the Gebench test that we run on every change of the TOS, just for testing. And well, we have now the results, and basically there is no big difference between the ST and the Mega ST with Blitter, because basically that's what we are using. We are getting advantage of the Blitter basically in TOS 2.06. Now let's move forward and let's give it a try and change to the newest 2025 release of EmuTOS, EmuTOS 1.4. Easy swapping. Now we check where we are. EmuTOS version 1.4, as I said. And now we are going to run the Gebench. Why I have Gebench running in drive B? Because this version of because I'm using an emulated B drive thanks to my other device, the multi-device. So I have a virtual floppy with the tools to run the test. Actually, as you can see, the C drive is also running, but I'm using the B because I think it's how I prepare the test for testing. So we again load the test as default as the Rainbow TOS test, and we compare how the result is. And the results are basically, as we will see, exactly the same that we obtain running in a ST computer with a Blitter. If you have a Blitter, you will have the same results, mostly the same results, in both computers, STE and Mega ST with Blitter or ST with Blitter. So now we have completed the test, and it's time to wrap up. From its rushed beginnings as Tramiel operating system cobbled together with this Digital Research GEM and CPM, to the final and polished 2.06 ROM version, and beyond into the real community-driven innovation, TOS has had one wild journey. It faced limitations like ROM size and CPU speed, but brilliant engineers, both Ataris and hobbyists, found ways around them. The Atari ST might have lost the 16-bit home computer war to the Amiga in the 90s, but in this little corner of the retrocomputing universe is still very much alive. Its operating system continues to evolve thanks to fans who just won't let it die. We went from floppy distributed TOS to ROM chips, from single tasking to multitasking, from closed source to open source. We have seen TOS run on hardware it was never meant to, and do things its original authors never envisioned. And with tools like SidecarTridge TOS Emulator, we can benchmark and play with all these versions side by side. In our video, you have seen some of these TOS versions in action on real hardware. Magic, unsurprisingly, blitzes past the others in user interface performance. Those hand-coded routines make window redraws fly. EmuTOS proved itself quite robust and even faster in some systems calls than Atari own code. And Piperas showed how well-optimized TOS could save a few seconds here and there of these operations and uploading. It's the culmination of everything learned about this OS over the decades. Thank you for joining me on this journey through time and code. If you enjoyed witnessing an Atari ST booting every OS under the sun, or you learn a thing or two about obscure TOS releases, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more retro content. This is Diego from SidecarTridge, signing off. And remember, the spirit of Atari is alive and well as long as we keep pressing power buttons and hearing the floppy drive chirp. Or in our case, the flash of an SD card LED. See you in the next one.